Can I invite everybody to close their eyes for a minute? And if you imagine you're in your workplace, wherever that might be, and you imagine that people, colleagues in work, care about you as a person. Imagine you're in a company that doesn't just care about making profit. It actually has a higher purpose in life. Imagine the company you work for is actually conscious about the environment and conscious of the decisions they make and the impact that has on the environment. So let's look at some reality. Gallup do a study every couple of years in the workplace globally. 87% of people are actually emotionally disconnected from the workplace. Now, if you think about it, in our working lives, the time we're working, we spend about half of our non-sleeping life in work. And 87% of us are disconnected from that work. I read a study by a Californian psychologist whose name is completely unpronounceable last week that said that one of the biggest connections with happiness is fulfillment in the workplace. And 87% of us are disconnected from that. So no wonder we have some challenges in the world at the moment. Sainsbury's, the supermarket, did a study a few years ago where they interviewed customers and the great British public and found that 80% of people expected companies they bought things from to play a positive role in society. But only 30% of them felt that companies did do that. And that's across all social classes. Now, there's a bit of a disconnect there between what people say is important and the reality. And you can see by the way people are chasing after the discounters, and there's a massive price war on food at the moment, suggests that people maybe say one thing and do something else. But there is that desire amongst people that companies should be a better force for good. So let me tell you a bit about my journey. Okay, I've been in business all my life. I did a business degree in Dublin. I was a graduate trainee with a company called Mars, selling sweets, which is an interesting place to work. And then I spent a number of years running a consultancy called SRCG, traveling the world, advising retailers on strategy. And after a while, I started to get disillusioned by how short-term focused so many of our international, big multinational companies were. And how so frequently the phone would ring, we had a big project on, and there'd be a phone call saying, actually, we've just had a phone call from New York or Brussels, the headquarters. There's a shortage in the profit this quarter, so the project's been cancelled. I'd also spend a lot of time talking at conferences about how you could compete against the likes of Tesco if you were community-based, if you actually had something you cared about and was something different than that peddled by Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, etc. So having decided to leave the consultancy, I did get the opportunity to do that. And Musgrave, the Irish company, had bought Budgens and were converting it into a franchise. So I bought Budgens in Crouch End. I'm seeing Sally over there, who was my fellow retailer in Crouch End. And then Belsize Park, which was mentioned a year later. And we set about creating what we call this community supermarket that really cared. And what that really meant was we cared for our community and we cared for the environment. And I'll give you an example of a couple of things we did. We started a farm on the roof of the Crouch End store called Food from the Sky. And I think some of you have mentioned it here today. And we got people from our community, regular people in the community, school children, to actually learn how to grow fruit and vegetables on the roof of our supermarket. And then we sold that product downstairs, and that money went back into the roof to educate more people on food growing. So we were connecting people with food. We were celebrating our joy of food. And we had the most local product in the country. It was 8 vertical meters from the roof down to the shop floor. So even your local farm shop, it's going to be at least a couple of 100 meters away from the farm store where it's growing in. So it was the freshest food in the world. And it connected us with our community. And it connected us with food. The other thing, there's an urban myth in the supermarket industry, which is that, you go into supermarkets and most chillers don't have doors on them. So they're pumping out all this cold air. You go in, the aisles are really cold, so they have to turn the heating up even more. And there's a myth that if you have doors on your chillers, you'll sell less. So in both our stores, we put doors on our chiller, and we proved to the world supermarket industry that actually you didn't lose sales. Now, the carbon impact of that in 2 stores is relatively insignificant. However, the impact of that being adopted by policy by Sainsbury's, Tesco, Co-op, and many international retailers is substantial. So a business that cares, that has a heart, will do things like that, will take risks, to inspire other people for change. Now, you'll notice that I haven't really talked about the people who worked in the company. And for the first number of years on this journey, I kind of missed that bit. And two significant things happened. First of all, like many people in this room, I went on the journey at Embocum, led by Mac and Jonathan, and kind of realized that actually I was missing out on the people group, and soon got a number of my managers and supervisors down to Embocum. We created a task of creating a feast from the land for people, which is very appropriate for a group of supermarket people to do. And then the second thing was that in Crouch End, we were competing against Tesco and Marks and Spencer's, and that was fine. But then Waitrose opened as well, and there was just too many supermarkets trying to chase too little food, too little custom. So in the end, I had to sell that store. But what that did was made me realize the need to go even deeper into the people side of things. So we're all people. We're all work in organizations, be they businesses, it might be our own business, whatever. We're all people working in organizations. And I realized I needed to go deeper into the people side of the business. And we created something called the HEART program. So I'm going to show you a video, so if you want to press the play button, you'll get a sense of what that's about.
A 2013 poll by Gallup found that a staggering 87% of people globally are emotionally disconnected from their work. Given that we spend more than half of our waking hours at work, this is a tragedy for each and every unhappy individual, and of course, for the businesses where they work. Businesses which, because of this emotional disconnection, are both less productive and less profitable.
My perspective that it's really important for businesses to have a heart led us to look at the working environment here at Thornton Spudgeons, to see how we could engage people better in their jobs, create a safe environment where people felt trusted and cared for, and they could really bring all their full potential to their job every single day, and at the same time help us achieve our objectives as a company.
We began the HEART program with a one-to-one interview with every team member in order to get to know them better. For if they know we care, they will become more engaged in their day-to-day jobs.
After the interviews, they ran a series of departmental workshops. These were no ordinary workshops. They began with a meditation to create a relaxed and comfortable mood to enable people to share what they're grateful for in their lives, what's causing them pain, and their concerns for our planet and the company. And to ensure everyone's voice was heard, they use a talking stick.
If we don't talk about the truth, we're not really close to home to us. We're constantly trying to avoid it. So I invite you to be really truthful, really compassionate, and really open to each other.
With input from everyone, the team identified their skills and talents and then brainstormed ideas to develop the company.
It's make you feel good. You feel more confidence, you feel more open with your colleagues. I think, yes, it has helped them to, be open with the customers. I just feel I'm really part of this Thornton Spudgeons, and just feel like my home.
It just broke down barriers between the staff, and it allowed some of us to form like new friendships and things, so that was a good idea. I would recommend the HEART program, just to have a program where the people who work together can come together outside of work and get to know each other's lifestyles, to see our personality bloom more. I think it's a really good idea, because then once you come back into the environment, you help each other a lot more.
We had a strong team beforehand. It sort of seemed a lot better. Much more tight as a unit. I hope I've got a better understanding of people and not be so short with them sometimes. Gives them a bit more patience.
I even tried to do the same HEART program at home.
Wow.
And it was really interesting to hear from my family what they're thinking about that. And we start, feeling better, more close, and even now love is more bigger and bigger.
The HEART program has resulted in a positive mindset, one that creates a constructive atmosphere and leads to real change in the company. One outcome is the intention set by the Fresh Food team that Thornton's Budgeons would never again throw away any edible food.
Globally, we waste between 30 and 50% of all of the food that we produce. In the UK, that's around 15 million tonnes of food each year, much of which is perfectly edible.
The team worked with Sustain and Centrepoint to develop a process that ensured their daily food surplus is used to feed the homeless.
I've been really struck by how the whole team at Thornton's Budgeons has really got behind this and shown great commitment to it.
Thornton's Budgeons now have a team that are engaged and feel safe to bring their full potential to work every day.
Since we implemented the Heart programme, there's a buzz and there's an energy around the store that there wasn't before. And customers comment and notice it. They don't know why, but they notice there's a difference. Thank you. The most touching part of that, preparing that video, was when Rasa said she'd taken it home and used it with her family. In fact, somebody else, another guy who I interviewed who's on the screen, said the same thing. And she talked about love. And you know, somebody said earlier, we don't use the word love in business very much. I'll tell you a story. Not too long ago, our cleaner's called Una. And Una's partner passed away and she was off work for a few weeks. And I saw her the day she came back, and she was going into the boiler room. We have so little space. The boiler room is where she keeps all her stuff. It's a dark, dingy room. And I went into her, and she put her arms around me, and she just wept in my arms for, I don't know, we were in there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. I have no idea. You know, no words were spoken. They weren't needed to be spoken. And the fact that she felt comfortable and relaxed to collapse in the boss's arms and cry really touched me. And that's, for me, what a business or an organization with a heart is about. I believe in my heart that this is a much better way of doing business, and I'm seeking to prove it. Some of the evidence we've had in our store, we have a thing called a mystery shopper, where someone comes in and pretends to be a customer and shops and ticks boxes. Our scores used to be really inconsistent. 60% one week, 100% the next week, 72% the next week. And I used to be a bit skeptical, it's only one person and so on. But the reality was, it meant we were inconsistent. And since we started this program, we have only ever got 100%. That's 10 in a row, 100% for customer service, which is pretty good. The guy called Chris Martin, who's the group CEO of Musgrave, who own Budgeons, and he has friends in the area, so he comes in quite a bit. And I met him for coffee a few months after he started this, and he said, Andrew, what's happened? What's changed in the store? Because he picked up a different energy. And you get that when you go into the store. You feel there's something different. There's something about the way people connect to each other, relate to each other. And some of the scenes of people smiling in the videos, you can't fake that. You know, and I didn't shoot them, and I saw it afterwards, and I was just, you know, my whole heart filled up with joy when I saw some of the team and how they were. And I see that every single day in work. So I am seeking to prove this. There are other examples, and I think Bill is right. There are good things happening out in the corporate world. I know we hear a lot of the bad things that are happening. But I'd like to talk about a couple of examples. One is a company called Interface, a carpet company. Some of you, I think if you've been at the Be the Change conference, you will have heard of them. Mostly a relatively unknown company. 20 years ago, the guy who founded it, Ray Anderson, had this epiphany, and he suddenly realized the damage that was being done to the environment in making carpets. So he set a pledge that his company, within 20 years, which is this year, and they've achieved it, would be carbon neutral. They would do no damage to the environment. And they completely re-engineered how they made carpets. And, you know, I could talk for you know, hours about that process alone. But what's interesting is not only did they do that, they increased their sales by 2/3, they doubled their profits, they had a whole stack of free publicity, and they had a much, much more engaged workforce. Because can you imagine going to work feeling as if you're going to make a positive contribution to the planet, as opposed to just going and lining the pockets of some distant shareholder or some bloke who owns the company? And you know, I was touched in our company by somebody once saying, it's fantastic to work for a company that just doesn't care about profits. Okay? I mean, I genuinely believe if you put people and our planet first and trust profit will follow, then that is a way of doing business. It's a much better way of doing business. And I'm not saying that making profit's bad, because we need that profit to be sustainable. Another example is Sainsbury's, in the industry I work in, who've quietly done a lot on the sustainability front. Most people aren't. They've quietly worked away in it. And in trying to look at what's happening, there's an interesting quote from The Guardian, from Niles Pratley, who's a business editor there. And he said, "The moral of the tale, almost mundane by now, is that Sainsbury's values-driven culture, however wishy-washy it sounds, may be the source of its success." So there's a sort of begrudging acceptance amongst financial journalists and even financial analysts that this is good business to do things this way. The other thing I'm developing is a thing called the Heart Index. Now, I believe if companies measured the pulse of their organization through a measurement of how people in the company felt, and even further looking at customers and maybe suppliers, you get a much better impression of how things were going than by just measuring quarterly profits. And if you look at Tesco, I guarantee you, if Tesco were measuring a Heart Index, their shareholders would have known 3, maybe even 4 years ago that that company was in trouble. But they were cooking the books, as we all know. And it's incredible how you can cook the books for that long, but you can. So short-term profits are not a good measure. So I absolutely want to develop this Heart Index. So before I conclude, there's 3 things I'd really like to get out of today. First of all, I'm looking, and I realize there's lots of people who aren't in business here, so, bear with me, those who aren't. But those who are, or those who know people in business, I'm looking for other businesses to work and put this philosophy into place. Because it's easy for people to dismiss it's only one supermarket, it's a relatively small organization. I believe this can work in much bigger organizations and can be incredibly transformational. Secondly, spread the word. I think my blog, which was launched 2 days ago, is up there. I think I have 7 Twitter followers at the moment, maybe more after today. So Twitter is heartandbusiness.org. So maybe there might be 8 or 9 by the end of the day. And the other point is, hopefully there's maybe even one thing out of what I've said that inspires you. So bring it back to the organization you work for. And whether it's a business or it's a not-for-profit organization, it doesn't actually matter. I mean, I talk about business because that's the area I know in. But I believe everything I'm talking about today equally applies to all organizations. So I want to conclude. When Mac talks, he talks a lot about the children's fire, and I'm guessing that's a children's fire in front of us there. I've got 2 sons who are 18 and 20, young men, and I'm certainly not prepared to be complicit in the kind of further destruction of the world we live in. So I'm asking each and every one of you to join me in this sort of crusade, I guess, if you want, to put the heart back into business. Thank you very much.